Today, I would like to talk about genocide and why we should prioritize the survivors of genocide for humanitarian assistance, for settlement, for asylum. Why genocide? Genocide, the crime of crimes, differs from any other mass atrocities in that it requires the specific intent to destroy a protected group in whole or in part. It is not about the numbers of the victims. It is not about the atrocities per se. It is about the atrocities as perpetrated with the specific intent to destroy the protected groups in whole or in part. What does it mean? Think of the Jews targeted for annihilation by the Nazis. Think of the Tutsis targeted by the Hutu in Rwanda. Think of the Bosniaks targeted by the Bosnian Serbs in Srebrenica. Think of the Christians, Yazidis, and other religious minorities targeted by the Islamic State, Daesh, in Syria and Iraq. And think of the Rohingya Muslims targeted by the Burmese government, Burmese army in Myanmar. These are all cases of genocide. In all those cases, the perpetrator intended to destroy the protected groups in whole or in part. And I would like to focus on one case specifically, the case of the Daesh genocide. In early 2014, Daesh unleashed its genocidal campaign against religious minorities in Syria and Iraq in an attempt to establish a purely Islamic state in accordance with its perverted interpretation of what that would involve. And it involved mass murder, torture and abuse, rape, sexual violence, abduction, forced displacement, forced conversion, and much more. Name a crime, Daesh has been perpetrating it. In October 2016, I traveled to Nineveh Plains in Iraq. It was only a few weeks after the area was liberated from Daesh. And some of the pictures from that trip you can see behind me. And what I saw there, ash, destruction, rubble, made a very clear case that Daesh wanted to destroy every sign of those religious minorities ever living in the area. It was not enough for them to kill the members of the religious minorities. It was not enough to take their possession, take their homes. They wanted to destroy every sign of those religious minorities ever living in the area. Every sign. And as Daesh was perpetrating this genocide, Lord Alton of Liverpool appeared in the House of Lords here in the UK, called upon the UK government to act, to assist the survivors, and among others, to provide them with adequate assistance, where they're in the field, resettle them to a safe place, offer them asylum in the UK. And the response from the UK government has always been the same. They provided the targeted communities with adequate assistance, and when conducting the assessment for the purposes of asylum, they do so in accordance with the humanitarian principles of impartiality and neutrality. They don't discriminate based on religion, and they treat all equally. And I would not focus on whether the response to the atrocities, whether the humanitarian assistance was adequate. Rather, I will focus whether the application of the concept of the model of equality for the case of genocide is the right way forward. Is equality always the right response? And is this model of equality the right response to the case of genocide? So what is equality? Equality has many meanings. It may mean being equal in rights, being equal in status, in opportunities. Apologies, just a technical glitch, please ignore it. And we're always being told that equality is good. Being equal in rights is good. Being equal in status is good. However, as you can see, there is a small red asterisk above the word equality. And I will zoom in on it for you. Equality is good and it can work as long as we start from the same place, as long as we have the same characteristics, we have the same status, we have the same needs and require the same assistance to those needs. However, the problem is we are not equal. We are not the same. We don't have the same characteristics. We don't have the same needs. We require different level of assistance. And as you can see from the picture, those differences are not necessarily as simplistic as the difference in our heights. The differences are more complex and require a more tailored response. And this is also why equality is not always the right response and should not be treated as the only response. And this is where another model, the model of equity, may be of assistance. Equity goes beyond equality, focuses on the differences, addresses them, and it is the outcome that matters. And this brings me to this very popular comparison of the model of equality and equity. And again, equality may be the right starting point. However, because equality does not address the differences, it should not be treated as the only response. And the model of equity may be of assistance. It addresses those differences, and this is the outcome that matters. But then the question is, if we apply the model of equity together, what should be the guiding principle? What should be the ultimate outcome? To answer this question, in December 2018, I traveled to Punta del Este in Uruguay to meet with over 30 human rights experts and to discuss how, on the eve of the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, to ensure a better protection of human rights, ensure a better implementation of human rights for everyone. And the answer was very clear. It is the concept of human dignity for everyone, everywhere, that has the force, the strength, to be the guiding principle for the models of equality and equity, and strengthen the protection of human rights for everyone. And our discussions resulted in the Punta del Este Declaration on Human Dignity for Everyone, Everywhere, a 10-point document that explains how the concept of human dignity for everyone, everywhere, can be used to maximize the enjoyment of human rights. And Article 10 of that declaration focuses on mass atrocities. It talks about the prevention of atrocities like genocide. It talks also about the need to provide them with adequate assistance. And I would focus on the duty to prevent, prevention, as it goes to the very core of the question why we need to prioritize the survivors of genocide for assistance. Prevention. Of course, the duty to prevent means preventing this genocide from occurring. And if we go back to the case of the Daesh atrocities, Daesh genocide, we know that the global coalition against Daesh, that consisted of 78 international partners that came together to stop Daesh, they managed to prevent Daesh from continuing with their atrocities. However, we need to remember that Daesh managed to perpetrate this genocide, and they are responsible for significant loss of life, significant damage done to the religious minorities that are in Syria and Iraq. And of course, in the case of genocide, and in the case of the Daesh genocide, the question is whether we were able to prevent this genocide from happening. And initially, I told you that this Daesh genocide began in 2014. But it is crucial to emphasize that genocide does not just happen. It requires preparation, it requires planning, it requires circumstances, and above it all, it requires our ignorance of the red flags. So were there any red flags? To answer this question, I would like to take you back in time a little bit. I would like to take you back to 2011. Let's rewind. In 2011, the UK Border Agency published a report about the situation in Iraq. It identified the dire situation of religious minorities there. It identified cases of murder, cases of abductions, attacks on religious gatherings, and among others, it also identified a very important red flag, and that was that armed groups targeted Christians, Yazidis, Shabaks communities, and labeled them crusaders, devil worshippers, infidels. Exactly as the Nazis labeled Jews as vermin, exactly as Hutu labeled Tutsis as cockroaches, exactly the same way, but we missed this red flag. But some of you may say that 3 years is not enough to prevent such mass atrocities like genocide. Agree to disagree? I will take you back a little bit more. I will take you to 2003. Let's rewind. When I interviewed Iraqi Christians who managed to escape Daesh, they told me to look beyond the atrocities that Daesh perpetrated in 2014. They told me to look at, for example, 2003. And in 2003, that's when the former regime collapsed and left a power vacuum that was abused by individuals, armed groups, to further their goals. And this is also where the single incidents of violence against members of religious minorities turn into more organized, more systematic acts. And those atrocities began the journey towards such mass atrocities like genocide. The red flags, the signs of genocide to come, were there after 2003. The signs were there again and even more visible in 2011. Yet again, we all fail to identify. We failed to act and prevent the atrocities from escalating to genocide. And when we already failed to prevent such mass atrocities like genocide, we need to do our best to ensure that we protect the remnants, that we protect the targeted communities. And one of the steps that could be taken to protect the targeted communities like Christians, Yazidis, would be to, for example, provide them with adequate assistance in the field. Sometimes it may be needed to remove them from the danger zone or offer them asylum in another country. But it appears that this consideration is removed from the approach taken by the UK government. Case of genocide is a very specific one. And this is because of the specific intent to destroy the protected group in whole or in part. In the case of genocide, we may need to treat the targeted communities differently. We may need to prioritize the communities for humanitarian assistance. And this is for a very basic reason. There is a risk that if we don't provide them with this assistance, the genocidal atrocities, as coupled with the lack of assistance, will take their toll. And this is a risk that humanity cannot take. And if there's anything I would like you to remember from today is this. Genocide, the crime of crimes, requires a different approach. And genocide is this kind of a glitch to the model of equality. A glitch that is not a technical one, not a glitch that we can ignore. It is a glitch that requires a combined effort of the model of equality, working together with the model of equity, but both models should be guided by the concept of human dignity for everyone, everywhere.